Hey everyone, it's Rye. Gonna be bringing you a new tier list video. In this video, we're gonna be discussing pantheons, and unfortunately, I made a bit of a mistake when I initially recorded this video, and I wasn't recording my voice, which has happened before. If anyone's watched my streams, they know that happens quite a bit. My mic dies all the time in videos. That's not scripted. That just happens because I'm brain dead. And I didn't record my voice. It was such a great video. It was like 2 hours long. It was me and like 5 or 6 other people. So I have that recording without my voice, and we discuss ad nauseum all of the pantheons and everything like that. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to upload because I'm doing most of the commentary work, but I'm going to upload that as well behind this one. I'll put it in the description as just like supplement if you want to hear what everyone else was saying. There's some really, really funny dialogue, especially about Sun God. What else? Rite of Spring was pretty interesting. Our God King discussion was pretty good. Earth Mother was good. There's a lot of really good stuff in here. But anyway, I'm going to be trying to make this a little more condensed as before, and we'll go from there. In general, I think the pantheons are going to get changed pretty soon, so this might be out of date by the time you're watching. But just know that this is done on version 32.8. And I think they're pretty well balanced in general. There's some that are pretty bad, but otherwise, there's some pretty good ones. So I mentioned this. If you watch the original one, you'll see that we start with God King and then we go in order. And I think God King is a perfect place to start. The reason why we start at God King is because God King is the perfect example of a pantheon that can be really, really good, but most of the time is dog shit, right? So where do you rank that type of pantheon? Well, we're basing our pantheon rankings based on how frequently you take them and how good they are to take when you take them. So if it's very, very common to take and it's very, very good, it's going to be the best. If it's very, very, very uncommon to take, but it's very good, it'll probably be like C tier, right? And so for that example, we'll start with God King. God King is going to be the first pantheon we rate, and it's going to be C. God King, I think the turn we decided it's worth it to take God King or not is around turn 8 or 9. So there's not a lot of civs that can do that. It's kind of exclusively Jerusalem, Australia, Celts, potentially New Zealand, stuff like that. If it's turn 8, you can probably God King is really good. It's a lot of yields. For those who don't know, God King is 1 food, 1 production, science, gold, culture, faith, and happy, all in the palace. So if you're hungry, this actually would double, but again, it's probably not worth it. Usually there's just better yields. So, but the problem is it's isolated to just your cap. And pantheons mostly are for your whole empire. So typically God King's not the best. All right. So with that in mind, let's start going down the list. So we'll have Altars of Worship, which is 20% production towards ancient, classical, and medieval wonders. You'll mostly take this if you don't have a clear demo pantheon and you're playing tradition. In some games, it can be quite strong, but it doesn't feel great. It's hard to quantify how helpful altars is. Oftentimes, if you're playing in really competitive lobbies, people are going to be scouting wonders constantly. So if you're queuing a lot of wonders, people might avoid building them. Or altars is mostly, in my opinion, used to have expand wonders be a lot faster. So this is exclusively a tradition wonder or tradition pantheon where you don't have, good demos such as like Sun God or Food from Camps or something like that. Ancestor Worship. So this is not the best pantheon. We thought it was pretty underrated, but it's one of those pantheons where the places where it would be good there are better things, right? It's rare that like you need this type of specific yield, whereas something else could just be better. And by that I mean, Ancestors Worship, for those who don't know, two culture from shrines. Pretty unique pantheon. It sounds very good on piety. Might be pretty good on like liberty or something like that, like lib 2 piety stuff. But in those circumstances, you'd probably rather just have craftsmen or religious settlements or something like that. It's unlikely that this is, or even better if you're building the shrines anyway. Most of the time, Vision Quest is just going to be better than this. So it's a weird circumstance where this would be good. I think there's still some like experimenting to be done with this, but yeah. Dance of the Aurora, 1 faith from Tundra tiles. This is complete dog shit. I don't want to spend much time on it. Most of the time, this would be good. You're not working those tiles anyway. You're like coastal or something like that, so you might settle on some, but it's not going to be your whole empire. And if it is, your game's just going to be ass anyway. Oftentimes, if you're in the tundra, food from camps is pretty good. Rite of Spring, there's usually a lot of deer, bison, stuff like that. These are all better options than this. This is just usually really bad. Desert Folklore. Now, this is one of those, and in general, we actually don't rank Faith Pantheons that highly. Desert Folklore, similar to Dance of the Aurora, but definitely a bit better with large stretches of desert. Ultimately, this comes down to, if I'm getting this Pantheon, what am I doing with it? I'm getting a pretty fast religion. Oftentimes, it doesn't beat you to piety players. Sometimes it does. But if you still lose to the piety players, then you're not getting those really good religions that you want to get early on, like Salat Relcom or something like that. So it's hard to justify this. Divine Judgment. Desert Folklore, by the way, was 1 faith from Desert Tiles. Divine Judgment, 2 faith from barracks, courthouses. And then, in addition to that, 2 happiness from the palace. So this is B. We ranked this B tier. This was a little controversial. I did not think too highly of it, but two of my buddies that were in the call, Mega and Nytes, both ranked it very highly. I personally haven't tried it yet, so it's not the first thing I think of trying. Most of the time, because Barracks Hammers or God of War is just better, but if Barracks Hammers is gone or something like this, this could be a good option. Especially, this is a very good Pantheon for when you are archering city-states. Oftentimes on those builds, you don't want to... Your faith is really, really slow to get going. And this allows you to, translate into commerce pretty easily, where you don't need to get a religion, or it lets you get, your sacred sites religion going a lot faster or something like that. So there's a lot of options with Divine Judgment. The happiness is genuinely relevant for when you're trying to annex cities before you have courthouses, so you can tank that happy hit a little bit better. So there's some use for this, and I think it's because it's a newer Pantheon, people haven't really tried it yet, but not too strong. I think it's solid where it is at B. Earth Mother. So I'm gonna give you guys a little spoiler, but this is actually going to be the highest ranked faith Pantheon in the game, and that we ranked in the game, assuming you don't count God of the Sea. But Earth Mother is 1 faith from mines, 2 faith from iron. So what's good about this Pantheon is it isolates all of those yields into 1 tile. Iron becomes, when you improve an iron, assuming you're not Russia, is 4 hammers, obviously, and then 3 faith. So 3 faith tiles are huge, right? So if you have 2 or 3 iron, or I think usually the breakpoint's 3 iron. If you have 3 iron in your cap, or not in your cap, sorry, within your empire, sometimes in your cap, that is an enormous amount of yields. Like only working 3 total tiles. Not to mention all the other mines. It scales really well. Faith for mines is really good. So yeah, just overall very strong Pantheon if you need something for faith. Typically, people will opt for piety if they have a lot of iron just to secure this, if that makes sense. So Craftsman, based on the new map that we're currently playing on, where there's a lot more hills than there were before, Craftsman got an inadvertent nerf. You don't need as many hammers, but still very strong Pantheon. 1 production from all cities is always going to be relevant and always going to be strong. So always good to have as an option for when you're playing something like Liberty or Wide Piety, where these demos that you immediately get are extremely relevant. But okay, God of the Open Sky, one culture from pastures. So this is the Pantheon to pick if you are Tradition and you didn't get Oracle. Tradition is all about finishing the tree as fast as possible so you can get aqueducts as fast as possible. God of the Open Sky is usually on most tradition caps and most tradition land, the Pantheon that synergizes the best with this. You're going to have stable tech quite early because of the emphasis that you're putting on Chichen. Pastures are going to come up fast because of how just the amount of workers you have. You're going to be able to grow to those tiles much easier, like those second or even third ring cow and sheep tiles. All of those are going to be within your borders. So Open Sky is generally sought after as the Pantheon to pick when you're picking trad and you didn't get that. In addition to that, you could think of something like I guess I won't spoil it, but there's options. God of the Sea. This is our first double S tier Pantheon. This Pantheon is insane. This is the reason that you build a shrine on coast, right? This is the best Pantheon on the coast, full stop. Most of the time, people will just pick Piety to grief their tradition player of getting this. If you miss out on this Pantheon, it's detrimental to your game, oftentimes, on the coast. So, you better have a really, really strong game in terms of if you get fishboat hammers or something like that, where you have to have a lot of fish. God of the Sea is so consistent. It's so strong. Overall, fantastic Pantheon, I think. And it shouldn't be much of a surprise. Everyone kind of knows God of the Sea is incredibly strong, and it's the most sought after coastal Pantheon by far because of it. God of War. All right. First S tier Pantheon. Now, this Pantheon, like I mentioned before when we were talking about Divine Judgment, is just the quintessential honor Pantheon. If you are clicking honor, you always have this Pantheon to go to. It's so consistent. It's so strong. Just overall incredibly good. Pretty much if you watch any of my honor videos, any of my honor guides, any of my gameplay, you'll see me take God of War almost every single time. Unless it was gone. And it is pretty contested, so you just got to keep that in mind. All right. Goddess of Festivals. Now, this is a Pantheon. Oh, and that was 2 hammers from Barracks, by the way, in case you didn't know. Festivals, not very good. This is a newer Pantheon. 1 production from sugar, wine, and spices. It's a little underwhelming when you compare it to the other newer Pantheons and the other reworked Pantheons. It's quite strong, but even in the most perfect scenario, it's only ever going to be at most 7 hammers. Oftentimes, you don't get sugar and wine together. Those don't spawn together usually. They spawn in different terrain areas, so you're unlikely to get, wine as a secondary luxury to sugar, if that makes sense. And then spices is obviously pretty random. So it's not very good. Oftentimes there's just better options than this in terms of total yield. So not something I would ever really consider. But obviously not nearly as bad as these. Goddess of Love. Now I think this is one of the Pantheons that I feel like has been kind of forgotten about, which is crazy to me because it used to be a staple of the game. It got nerfed so many times, and now it's settled at 1 happy with Insidious at 3 or more pop. Just very consistent. Hey, this is going to scale really well. If you're playing 7 cities, that's eventually 7 happy, which is just incredible. Oftentimes when I'm playing Honor and I don't get God of War, I'll opt for Goddess of Love, and if I'm playing 10 City Honor or something like that. Perfect example is actually the France game I just uploaded, where Ashwin played the second half. That is a perfect example of God of Love. I took God of Love there, and it gave me 10 happiness, which is effectively just another Notre Dame, which is insane. So can't I absolutely love this Pantheon. It's so good. Criminally undertaken, at least as of recent. But all right, Gods of Protection. Now this is truly the worst Pantheon in the game. One faith and culture from walls, 50% city bombardment strength. The only time you should ever take this is if you're in the middle of dying. That's the only time. No, even on like Gauls or Hungary or any type of wall civ, this is awful. And the problem with this Pantheon is any wall civ that if it becomes too strong, then the wall civs become too strong. If that makes sense. So it's really a tough spot. I don't know how you'd balance this without making it overpowered for those civs. I don't know. God of the Fields. Two faith from cotton, incense, tea, and coffee. Now, if we talk about bad pants, that's actually this is also really bad. Most of the time, you don't really want to like. We're talking incense, cotton, tea, coffee. Now, I think we rank this a little too low personally, but it's still probably a C tier at highest Pantheon. The faith is obviously good, and isolating all that faith to those tiles is obviously pretty good too. But these aren't tiles that you often settle on, which is nice, but they're not the ones you want to be working at first right away, like iron is, right? So it's not, it's fine, it's okay, but if you try to play it with like City of God and stuff like that, you're just gonna have a really, really hard time. Goddess of Hunt, one food from camps. This is just, this is like one of the most stereotypical tradition pantheons in the game. This is a reason to click piety. If you're on a camp luxury and you have a bunch of deer and bison and stuff, this can be upwards of like 20 plus food, which is just insane for a single pantheon. So love this pantheon. It's not good in every game, of course, but it's just incredible. Harvest, one food from wheat and maize. Now, interestingly about harvest is that this doesn't have to be improved, unlike food from camp. So technically this would happen and occur faster, right? If you're playing Ethiopia or something like that, that's where it could be relevant than God of the Hunt. But in general, they are about the same tier. I think God of the Hunt's a little bit better just because in the circumstances which you're taking it, oftentimes being as tradition, unless you're Ethio, like I mentioned, or Celts or something like that, you're gonna get camps are like the most important tiles to improve. They just have the highest total yields when you combine it with a granary. So if you're improving camps first, you're gonna get the bonus at the same time you get harvest. Additionally, you don't often want to improve the harvest tiles first because they're farms, and you want to improve hammers because you want to be getting your build queues down. So anyway, they're about the same. I favor Hunt for that reason, but yeah. So Messenger, another S tier pantheon, one faith and two science in a city with city connections. The capital also counts towards this once the first city connection has been established. Just an overall very consistent pantheon for Liberty. Now, I will say it is not very new beginner friendly. I would not pick this pantheon unless you really know what you're doing. Your game's going to feel pretty slow. I'll actually be uploading. I know people like viewing these a lot later on than right away, but I will have likely already uploaded a video where I abuse Messenger and get really fast night attack timing. So there's a little bit of optionality there, but in general, it's not. It can feel very oppressive to play against if the player you're playing is like really, really strong, a really strong player and knows how to use this properly. It can be very dangerous. It can push timings to like new extremes. The faith really does a good job of supplementing what you're looking for, right? The science feels good, but the faith makes it so that if you build shrines in all of your cities, you pretty much have your religion sorted out. I want to emphasize this is exclusively used pretty much on Liberty. I've seen it sometimes on Honor, maybe once or twice, but it's pretty much always the Liberty Pantheon and you combine it with pyramids and get fast roads up. Mystic Rituals. This is such a cool Pantheon. I love the design of this. Eep did such a great job designing this path in general. One food and culture from silk, dyes, perfume, and tobacco. Now, silk, dyes, perfume, and tobacco have historically been pretty bad and pretty underwhelming in general. This Pantheon makes them so strong and makes them really, really fun to have and makes them consistent and workable. And when I get tobacco or something like that, like I think tobacco is just probably like the best Pantheon in the game now because of, or one of them, because this Pantheon exists. Just so strong, so consistently good. I'd love to do a Lux tier list updated with these panths in mind, because you know, silk and dyes just are so much more workable. Instead of being like 1/1 tiles with some gold and culture on it, it's now like 2/1 tiles, which doesn't sound that strong, but that's so much better and so much more important. So can't stress this enough. It's a great Pantheon, very consistent. Obviously you only take it when you have those regionals, but you know, very good. Ocean's Bounty. This is typically seen as the alternative to God of the Sea. This is what you pick if you didn't get God of the Sea. Your game is gonna feel like shit if you're playing Tradition and you get you get Ocean's Bounty and you don't get Oracle. Like, it's just going to feel really bad. But I've seen some people play 3 City Ocean's Bounty or something like that and have really strong wonder runs. They'll get like an early GL or something like that, and they'll speed up their game. Combo it with like a good Oracle timing, or you know, a good Colossus timing, or whatever it is. So there's ways you can make it work. Oftentimes this is most commonly picked on Piety because you don't need the faith from God of the Sea, but Ocean's Bounty makes those tiles especially good and gives you early demos, which you're looking for. I love taking this Pantheon, especially on Coral and Whales. You know, Whales becomes Grand Mesa tiles with the Lighthouse, and Coral is just incredibly strong, easy to work, and obviously the faith supplements the faith you'd miss out on, or the faith you're missing out on from God of the Sea. So it really works well in tandem. Obviously, the thing you're lacking is the culture, but that's why God of the Sea is double S. One with Nature. You know, it's a similar concept to Earth Mother in that it's 5 faith per natural wonder. If you're Spain, it's 10 because it gets doubled, which is obviously really good. So if you're Spain, you take this quite a bit, and you have 1. But most of the time, I think you need at least 2 natural wonders. Some people would argue 3. So you need at least 2 to 3 natural wonders to even consider taking this, and oftentimes you still don't. You know, maybe if it's like Uluru, then you'd take it because those tiles are easy to work, or like Mesa or something like that. But, you know, if you have like, I don't know, like a Mount Fuji or something like that, or an Old Faithful, like, you don't want to take this. This is just really bad. Oral Tradition. So this is actually the other Pantheon I was referring to when it, as it relates to God of the Open Sky. It's generally just better, though. Oral Tradition, there's typically more Plantations. Those are your luxury tiles, so you're always improving those right away. If you spawn in like a Sun God area with a lot of you know, bananas and plantation stuff, like Oral Tradition is just such a no-brainer. It's so consistent. I like taking it on Liberty, on Trad, on I've taken it on Honor before. Typically don't like taking culture stuff on Piety, but just really, really good. Can't speak enough about it. It's so strong. And that's 1 culture from Plantations. Rain Dancing, 1 culture and 2 faith from Lakes and Oases. This Pantheon is ass. It's so inconsistently bad. Lake tiles are typically really low value tiles. I think the only exception to this is if you're playing something like Canada, Finland, Aztec, something that benefits from working lakes in general. But if you're not playing one of those civs, I think this is always it. Or, you know, you could even throw in Palmyra I guess, with the amphitheater. But in general, like, this is just not it. Like, you don't want to be taking this Pantheon. Usually it's something you settle for. You don't really have another option. Maybe your first two choices were gone, then you're left with this. Those lake tiles are really, really not good. People sometimes get baited into, taking this if they have, like, a cap with, like, 6 lakes or something like that. And I could see the appeal, but at the same time, it's like, okay, like, that means if I'm 6 pop and I'm working 6 lake tiles, I have 0 hammers. Just not, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to fit in. It's hard to, like, make a good game out of it, if that makes sense. Religious idols. 1 culture and 1 gold, or 1 culture and 1 faith from gold, silver, and copper. This is one of the original Pantheons from vanilla, and it shows, because this Pantheon fucking sucks. I might upload a video of me playing on idols. I had, like, the dream idol. I think I was gold regional with the copper secondary. I settled on so many of these things, and it still felt like ass. I think there was 10 total tiles, and it still felt like garbage. Just terrible, no good. It really goes to show, like, how effective and helpful that original Pantheon rework was, where beforehand all of them were like this, but now only this one is, and it's clearly outdated. It never gets picked. It's just effectively just complete waste. Settlements. Okay, so a lot of people have been waiting for this. If you watch any of my games, you watch any of, like, the Rising Star, like, groups, games, anything like that, you will see a lot of people take this Pantheon. It is guaranteed. It's so consistent. It's just the best Pantheon in the game. The most underappreciated part, but frankly, one of the main reasons I even pick it in the first place is the border growth. 1 food and 25% border expansion in every single city. So strong. If it was just 1 food and it was on the same par as Craftsman, I think Craftsman would probably be better. But with the border expansion, it's so good. I think this needs to get nerfed, like, genuinely. This Pantheon needs to get nerfed. I think it needs to be at, like, 2 pop. It starts working or something like that. Like, because right now in this current iteration, it's just way too broken. This gets picked first almost in every single game, at least ones that I play. Criminally underrated in a lot of lobbies that maybe aren't accustomed to my videos or the metas that kind of have sprung up recently, but yeah. Rite of Spring. Now, I think this is one of the most underrated and unappreciated pants in the game. Wait, no, this goes, yeah. It is 2 culture from, or 1 culture from deer and bison. Very strong. This is, if you think about it, you're often working these tiles always, like, right away. This is very commonly taken on Celts. It's very commonly taken if you lose God of the Sea and you're on the coast. Just, getting that immediate culture and tiles you're already working, already your highest yield tiles, like I've mentioned many a time, deer and bison are the 2 best tiles in your cap most of the time, so you're always working those. If you can buff them in any way, aka God of the Hunt, Rite of Spring, just kind of a no-brainer, going to be really good. Pushing culture, especially on tradition, is just so important, and yeah, just overall, really, really good Panth. Ritual Sacrifice. 1 culture and 2 gold from ivory, furs, and truffles. Now, I think this Pantheon is complete hot garbage. There's so many other options that you'd rather have than this when you have camps. Typically, camps isn't seen as, like, an aggressive type Panth, right? If you get truffles, you're not like, oh, I'm going to go cross with someone. Usually you're opting for God of the Hunt. This might be, like, the option you take if you didn't get God of the Hunt, or if you have a God of the Hunt land and you also have Trapping Lux, you might take Ritual or Rite of Spring instead. Ritual Sacrifice is usually, like, the last thing on your list of, like, oh yeah, I want to take that. It's hard to I actually did a really good job of, like, articulating this in the original video, but of course didn't record. Usually in the circumstances at which you'd want to be aggressive, you don't have these these luxes. The times you do would be ivory, because ivory is a good liberty panth. But if you're ivory, you just want settlements or craftsmen anyway. So it's unlikely that this would ever be something you pick. There's usually just something better. So if we establish that you're not picking it on lib, because of the pantheons, then what are you picking it on? You don't really want it on trad. You'd rather have God of the Hunt or something that gives, I mean, maybe you take it if Rite of Spring's isn't like, maybe only like you only have like 2 more tiles than you would have Ritual Sacrifice, because then the gold makes up for it. Something like that. Like I don't know the math behind it, but like ultimately, this is typically just not conducive to being aggressive, and this is clearly the type of pantheon that you pick if you want to go crossbow someone. Gets you gold generation and helps you push your culture policies so you can open honor in time, stuff like that. But typically, this is just not something that people are picking, and most games are not going to be better with Rite of Spring. I'll just put it like that. Sacred Path. 1 culture from forest, jungle, hardwood, and rubber. So what this means is if you have a hardwood tile that has obviously its forest on it, that becomes a 2 culture tile. So this can be a lot of culture, and it can be really strong. There are obviously Sacred Path civs, Vietnam, Iroquois. It's mostly just those 2 actually. But in general, like, it can be quite strong. Pushing culture can be really effective and really helpful, especially for playing Liberty or something like that. Or even if you have a lot of hardwood and you're playing trad, like this could be an option. Putting 2 culture on a single tile is obviously a ton. So, and let alone a tile you're already working. So it can be quite good. I think some people take it to the extreme, like not chopping anything, just to use as much, like Vietnam or something like that, just use as much as they can of this. But ultimately, that's not what you want to be doing. Okay. Seafood rituals. This is like a pantheon that fell from grace. With the map change, where there's not nearly as much fish anymore, like you're not guaranteed catfish, your expands don't have as much fish, it feels like. This is just not a very strong pantheon, but 1 culture, 1 food, 1 faith from fish tiles is no joke when there's a lot of fish on the map. This could be the best pantheon for your game easily if you have a ton of fish. Most of the time, though, you don't. And in those circumstances, this really isn't going to be something that helps you much. But I will say, I've seen a lot of really, really strong games, and I myself have taken it a couple of times. And when I've taken it, it's felt amazing. But in those circumstances, I have a lot of fish, and usually having a lot of fish is conducive to having a strong game. So in those things, it's kind of like a circular reference. Okay, spirit animals. This is probably one of the most common pantheons in the entire game. I think this is like a straight up perfect example of like a B tier pantheon. Most of the time, it's not exactly what you're hoping for, but it's good enough. You really can't go wrong picking this. You're guaranteed horses. Deer and bison are 2 of the most common tiles. For those who don't know, it's 1 faith from horses, deer, and bison. So it's just a faith pantheon that it's a very consistent faith pantheon. Spirit trees. Love this panth. I think it's so good when it's good, but unfortunately it's not good very much. The problem with this pantheon, well, let me read it first. It is 1 faith and 1 food from lumber mills, which is obviously really strong. Putting food on anything just makes the tiles so good. Anyway, the problem with this pantheon is twofold. First, lumber mill tiles are not super impressive until you get to economics and steel. Steel gives you 1 additional hammer. Economics gives you gold. Before that, the tiles themselves are not anything special. They're going to be like 1-2 tiles, or if in the case of hardwood, like a 1-3 tile or something like that. So this turns them into 2-2 tiles or 2-3 tiles. Obviously, 2-3 tiles are pretty good. Those are effectively stables or deer or something like that. 2-2 tiles are are horses without a stable. Improved horses without a stable. Like, they're not great. Like, that's like a hill farm. Obviously, the faith on it makes it a little bit better, but it's just, it's not anything special. Now, the main problem is that those are forest tiles, so you're not growing to those. So they're really expensive to buy. Now, the way to use this Pantheon in that logic then is to have Stonehenge, so it's a lot cheaper to buy them. But now, to make this Pantheon work, you need to have Stonehenge, you need to have a lot of gold income, you need to buy all of your fucking forest tiles, not to mention all the other tiles you're buying. It's hard to get to work. Now, obviously, on Columbia and on Iroquois, this Pantheon can be insane, like truly insane. Columbia, especially with already getting one additional food from lumber mill tiles, it can just be crazy, and I love it, and it's so much fun. It feels like you're cheating. You're, improving a hardwood becomes a grand mesa with a faith on it. It's just insane. Like, love this Pantheon so much, but fortunately, the way to have it work out is just, it's not it. Starlight. So with the coastal changes and the map, a lot of like Pantheons you're kind of seeing are conducive to certain map conditions. So in this case, it's a perfect example. When the map had a lot of really good islands and island density was really strong, it's very easy to pick Liberty on the coast, feel pretty good without seeing too many islands, or like just radaring and hoping they're there and then sending them out to the water. With that change, now islands are much worse. It's not super consistent to play Liberty, and frankly, it's probably the wrong idea unless you're like already have Liberty land without including islands. And if that's the case, obviously it's good. Like, don't get me wrong, this Pantheon is one of my favorite pantheons in the game. It's so good. You don't build a monument, you just go straight into Lighthouse in most of your Liberty cities. Helps easily bridge that happy gap that you usually have with playing coastal lib. It helps the cities come online faster because they're, instead of building a worker or something like that, they're building like something that gives 2 yields of improvements to just a single tile. It also gives a faith, so similar to what I mentioned about Messenger, where it kind of sorts out the faith or your religion. It's as long as you also get you build a shrine in every city. This is the same type of situation. And obviously, it just scales incredibly well. Culture, faith, and happiness from lighthouses is just such a good set of yields, very consistent. Problem is, you don't want to take this on trad because it's not enough yields. That doesn't happen fast enough. And the games in which you take it on lib are going to feel great, but you're just not playing lib as much. So unfortunately, it's going to be a B tier Pantheon, top of B tier. On the old map, I'd argue this is probably an S tier, low S tier, maybe high A tier Pantheon, but current map conditions, it's not going to be as good. Stone circles. I remember when we made our original religion guide, me and Glossen, stone circles was the best Pantheon in the game with 2 faith on it, on every quarry. Now at just 1 hammer and 1 faith from quarries, 2 faith from 1 faith and 1 production from quarries, and then 1 additional faith from marble and obsidian. It's just not nearly as good. You wouldn't think removing 1 faith would like remove it from relevancy, but it really has. Not to mention the map has changed. I keep saying this, but it kind of all plays together. The map has changed so much that you're just not getting as much stone anymore, right? Long gone are the days where you'd have like 10 stone in your empire's 4-city tradition. There's just kind of maps just don't spawn anymore for whatever reason. So unfortunately, stone circles isn't taken nearly as much. It's not as good, but I'll always remember the times where it was just so broken. It was just amazing. But anyway, okay, Sun God. My favorite tradition path by far is Sun God. It often just hits more tiles than you would on God of the Hunt, and it's more consistent. Oftentimes, if you spawning in the jungle, you're pretty much always picking Sun God, unless you have like sugar or something like that. God of the Hunt, you need a camp regional, or you just need an excessive amount of camps. It's just not as common. So Sun God and God of the Hunt are probably the same value in terms of impact. Now, Hawks actually makes a good point in that Hunt is more impactful because those tiles have more hammers on them compared to Sun God tiles, which are already really high in food. Now, the caveat to that is Sun God, though, comes online a little bit faster, and you often are always working these tiles instantly. Like, you're always improving your luxes right away, and you're always going to be working them right away. This also helps with settlers. Like, it's just one of those pants that is so consistent. The fact that it works on bananas as well as citrus, olives, coconuts, and cocoa is just so incredibly helpful. All right, Tier of the Gods, 1 faith and 2 gold from gem, amber, lapis, and jade. So if you guys are remembering correctly, this is actually extremely similar to the yields and ritual sacrifice. In fact, they're exactly the same, with the exception being this gives a faith versus a culture. Now, culture is typically seen as a higher yield, but remember, these are on better tiles. Typically, camp tiles aren't incredibly useful early on. They scale incredibly well. Generally, truffles not so much. But early on, they're not that great. You don't really want to work them. These, on the other hand, you're settling on. You want to work your mines. You grow into them all the time. This is just such an incredibly consistent path. And the gold, when you have these types of starts, is actually relevant because you often find yourself crossbowing when you have mining regionals because your game is faster. So this is exactly what I was saying earlier, where ritual sacrifice is not conducive to being aggressive early. This is conducive to being aggressive early, and this does help you get that first initial profit, and it does help you push enough gold to get crossbow upgrades or to get compo upgrades or whatever it is. Big fan of this Pantheon. I love the change. It's honestly like it's great because when you see someone take this, you now have to be on edge, right? They're going to have so much extra gold generation, and that gold is usually going to be used in some sort of aggressive way. Vision quests. Vision quests is just, it's similar to Boat to Starlight. You typically want something else if you're taking vision quests. Now, Kuba actually made a really good point when we were talking about love in the original one. And again, I'm going to have that in the description of the video. But when Kuba was initially talking about love, he was saying that you can change the way you're settling and you can maybe fit in extra cities because of the extra amount of happiness that you're going to be receiving from the Pantheon. Now, that's a really good point. It changes how you could play the game. Vision Quest is the exact same type of logic. Now, this is Goddess of Love if you're playing Piety. Typically, though, Vision Quest is just slower and not as helpful in the early game as something like Settlements or Craftsman, but it does scale incredibly well. It helps you with your gold problems. It helps you with the happiness bridge. Maybe you don't have to improve your luxes as fast, whatever it is. Just Vision Quest can be so incredibly strong in the right hands. Just absolutely love the Pantheon in general. It's just unfortunate that there's typically better options for what you're trying to do. Obviously, this is a wide type of Pantheon more so than a tall one. So, yeah, most of the time you're opting for Settlements or Craftsman when you're playing something like this, but Vision Quest definitely has its place. I've seen a lot of great games. I've played a lot of great games on Vision Quest. So, all right, and then finally, work spiritual. Oh, Vision Quest, sorry, is 1 gold and happy from shrines. So that's why I mentioned it's a clear Pantheon for when you're playing wide piety or something like that. All right, last one is 1 faith from plantation luxuries and bananas. So unlike oral tradition, this is actually interesting because it works for unimproved tiles. Now, that's actually important if you're playing piety and you take this as a faith Pantheon. Now, that's typically not the best thing to be doing, if that makes sense. So for that reason, it's not the best Pantheon, but it does fit its own niche. I've seen a lot of people take this on tradition if they lose out on oral tradition, or they don't have a good, or if they want a faith Pantheon and they don't have good spirit animals or something like that. This also works. It has its uses. I think I've personally not taken it much. We're currently not really in a faith Pantheon meta, but Yeah, in general, I think it's pretty strong. I think it fits perfectly in like the middle of C tier. You don't really want it. There's other options. You're fine if you take it. It's not that great, but you know it's okay. But either way, all right, that's all I had. Again, I'm really sad because that initial video was so good and there was a lot of good banter. I'll post it in case. I know a lot of people like listening to these as, you know, when they're falling asleep or when they're working or something like that. But anyway, I'll post that in the description. It's just fun to listen to. But yeah, let me know if you guys agree with this. Let me know what you disagree with. Let me know what's underrated, what's overrated. Leave it all in the comments below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. And I will see you guys next time.